Hello and welcome to With Winning in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Troy Bassham, and today I'm here with my father, Lanny Bassham, the founder of Mental Management Systems and arguably one of the best international rifle shooters in the history of the sport. And today we're going to take a look on just how do you become the best at what you do. And there's many things that you've done over your years that I don't think a lot of people know. Some things a lot of people know, but there's a few that we were discussing on. You got really good. And then you got to a point to where like, okay, I'm not over the hump yet. And then that started you with finding mental management. But over the time period from when you started the sport to the time you got to where you're discovering mental management, there were a lot of good principles that you later discovered that, hey, these are true principles. So I thought it'd be good to share with our audience today, just kind of go back to the beginning, hit a couple of major things that you thought were really important and kind of run with that and how it shaped you, not only as a rifle shooter, but as an individual at becoming one of the best of the best. So I want to begin with this beginning of shooting, and you and your dad were kind of going into this sport together, and he made a comment to you about, there's probably a lot of ways, like a million ways to do things wrong, but there's probably only really one best way to do it right. Let's try to figure out that one best way and do it correctly. Walk us through how that happened and then how that impacted you.
Well, having been an absolute failure at every sport that I'd ever tried to do before shooting showed up, I found that shooting was something that my physical makeup was not going to be an impediment to the sport. And so when I first started shooting, I went to a local club and they canceled the program. And so I thought I finally found something that I could do, but they canceled the program. And I thought, well, I'm done. But my father refused to stop there, and he told me I was walked out of the range when they closed the program. He said, and I told him, I said, I think this is the most disappointed I've been in my entire life. And he said, why are you disappointed? I said, I'm not going to get to shoot. And he said, you're going to give up that easily? And I, what am I going to do? He says, well, I'll tell you what. He says, they're not going to get to shoot, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get to shoot. He said, give me a couple of days. He says, I'm your dad. Let me see what I can do. And so he got the keys to an indoor range that nobody was using, and he took me to that range and began to teach me how to shoot. And that was really the start of learning some critical moments, things from my father that have made a difference in my life going forward. The first thing that he told me that I thought was been useful over and over again in my life, a game-changing moment, is he told me, he said, look, now, first of all, my father didn't know a whole lot about target shooting. He knew about service rifle shooting, but he didn't know about, the kind of target shooting like we were doing, that small bore rifle shooting.
So he was stationed. He was actually an infantryman, right, or not? Was he in the infantry when he was?
Oh yeah, he was an infantry officer. So he got a battlefield commission in Anzio Beach in World War II. That's how he ended up in the infantry as an officer.
And so he's at a military base.
Yeah.
They have a facility. He gets access to the facility, but he doesn't know anything about this international shooting. But he was able to find out about it.
You're right. That's right. But he went to he found out there was a marksmanship unit in the base that he was stationed at. He went to the marksmanship unit, got information about target shooting, came back and took me to this range, and I'm the only one there, the only shooter there, and like 4 days a week. After school, my dad, and he finished work, he would pick me up from school. He would take me to the range and begin to teach me how to shoot. And the first thing that he told me that stuck with me was that everything you do in life has one best way to do it. And we're going to find out everything we can about that one best way. If the task is getting a 10, okay, what's the best way to get a 10 in the various positions and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to learn everything we can about that. And then when I shot a bad shot, he didn't tell me, well, here's what you're doing wrong. He told me always, he was saying, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. So I was always thinking about the best way to do it, and I was always thinking about what I needed to do to get there.
Without realizing it.
Well, that is exactly what we have found out later on when you study mental management, is that every time you think about the solution to something, your self-image grows. Every time you think about the problem, your self-image shrinks. So I was always thinking about, how do I get better? How do I get better? And he built, as a solution-based coach, he was always talking about what I needed to do, not what I did wrong. I think that was a game changer for me. So from that moment on, I started realizing, without knowing anything about self-image or anything like that, that my father started out building my self-image without ever telling me that's what he was doing, because he didn't really know what the word self-image was, but he was doing the kind of things with me, and that paid off for him, because he spent so much time at the marksmanship unit that when the guy running that program rotated out, they asked my father if he'd take over the job of running the marksmanship unit, and so he did. And the one thing that my dad was good at was building people. He wasn't the best technical coach. Here's how to hold the rifle, or here's how to read the wind, or something like that. But he was good about building their self-image, and the same kind of techniques he was using with me, he used with them. And he was so successful that he got assigned to the United States Army Marksmanship Unit. Now, I'm over here on the range training small bore rifle, and there's nobody on the range.
But you said that was a huge advantage for you. I remember young that you said that one of the things that you felt was an advantage for you is being at the range by yourself and having a guy coach you was a benefit, because you didn't have any negative or bad influences around you.
That's
and
right.
That actually helped you. And I guess that would be an example of protecting self-image. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of drama with people. Most people learn how to do something in a group. You know, you have a group classes. It's cheaper to train people in a group. Okay, so that's why you go to school and there's people in the class, right? You don't have just one coach that trains you all the time, unless you're super rich. I guess you could do that. But there's advantages and disadvantages to that. The advantage is that there's a lot of people complaining about this is hard, or talking about their bad shots, or talking about things that don't go well. You're comparing yourself to other people. Okay, I'm not as good as he is. I'm better than this guy. And it pulls you away from being self-reliant. But when there's nobody there, you have nobody to compare yourself to. You're comparing yourself to you.
And you're not influenced with all that negative talk
I'm
and
not
that
interested
complaining,
by
because
that.
it's not existent.
That's right. And my father was telling me, he says, you will always in your life compare yourself to who you were yesterday. He said, your job is to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. Well, that's a big principle right there. And so I wasn't worried too much about what other people were doing. That's a big advantage in an individual sport where it's all about you, which is rifle shooting is one of those sports. I mean, you need to worry about what other people are doing in a team sport, but in an individual sport, it's if it's going to be, it's up to me. You know, that's like golf and shooting and archery and all that kind of stuff. So I started being, because of having nobody there, that was an advantage. The disadvantage is I had no negative imprinting by other people, but also had no positive imprinting by other people, which is a disadvantage to training by yourself. Okay, so
But that changed when he got
that
reassigned.
changed when my father got assigned to the United States Army Marksmanship Unit, because in that time in history, the United States of America dominated Olympic rifle shooting in the world, and all of our medalists were stationed at the United States Army Marksmanship Unit International Rifle Section. I had access. I went from not seeing anybody to having access to the best in the world, and I took advantage of it.
Yeah, and then you had the experience of hearing them talk, how they communicate, and that made a big impact on you.
Well, one of the things that they helped me with was that they all had the same story. They all went to a college that had a shooting sports program when they graduated from high school. I was in high school at the time. And so pick a school that has a shooting sports program, take ROTC, pass all your classes, graduate, make All-American, which is the top 10 shooters in the country, and you will automatically get an assignment to the Army Marksmanship Unit for a tryout. That doesn't mean you get to stay there, but at least you got a tryout. Well, they all did that. And so I at least had a plan to do that. So I did every one of those. I went to a school that had a shooting sports program. I took ROTC. I passed all my classes. I was All-American all 4 years in college, and I thought, I'm home free. I'm going to go to the Marksmanship Unit until the Army said, well, there's one other thing you got to do. You got to take a physical to get in the military, and I flunked the hearing exam.
So this was important because they wanted you to be in a specific MOS or what?
Well, what happened was I had every intention to be an infantry officer, because as an infantry officer, Fort Benning is the home of the infantry. That's where the infantry school is. It's an infantry assignment. There is no problem getting assigned if you're an infantry officer. Well, the problem is that by failing the hearing exam, because I shot full-bore rifles as a junior, always used air plugs, didn't protect me. I already had a little bit of a hearing loss. I mean, I could communicate with people, but it was not enough to where that I could get in the infantry. And so they said, we're going to put you in the Medical Service Corps. And Medical Service Corps had no intention of assigning me to the Army Marksmanship Unit. So it looked like my plan was derailed by an obstacle, okay? Now,
that's a pretty big obstacle when they won't let you go where you need to go.
A big obstacle, because if I can't go to the Army Marksmanship Unit, my chances of going to the Olympics are zero. You know, it's the second most expensive sport in the Olympics to train for. You need support, and the military had the best support for shooting.
Now it's a third.
So then, but what happened to me, the reason I got there, is when I went to Officer Basic, the first day of class, they said, you know, if you finish number one in the class, you get an exemption. You're treated differently. If you can go anywhere you want in the Army, as long as they'll accept you if you finish number one in the class.
How many people are in this class?
Hundreds of people. A couple hundred
so
people.
So it's a daunting task.
Oh, a daunting task. But I'll tell you what it did. What it taught me is it taught me that if there's a will, there's probably a way. And I just outstudied them. I mean, I had a higher level of motivation than the average guy going through that, because most of the people that go through the Officer Basic, they're not trying to finish number one. They're just trying to punch a ticket, because it's a requirement that every officer has to serve. But I was motivated. I wanted to go to the Marksmanship Unit, and if I had to finish number one, I would finish number one, and I did.
So
and
the key
when I did that, I got to the Marksmanship Unit.
So the key to this point of your career is that the door was shut, and then in this day when they said if you're number one, you can pick. If you want to go there and they accept you there, you get to go there.
That's right.
You looked at that as they just cracked the door open for me.
Well, they did, and what the teaching point here is that The first time a door shuts doesn't mean it's always going to stay shut. There's a real good opportunity that given more information, there's another door. Don't just say right away that, oh, it's over, I'm not going to do it. And will you quit looking for another door? Well, the door is it may be open. You just need more information. It doesn't necessarily mean that your dream is over, and that's what happened to me. I get to the Army Marksmanship Unit. I'm there for about 3 months, and I'm doing okay. I'm doing good, but there are several world champions already there, and I'm doing my best to progress and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking I've got a 3-year tour at the Marksmanship Unit to prove myself and to get on the U.S. team. And Colonel Pullum, the coach there, calls me aside one day, and I've been there about 3 months, and he says, "I got to tell you something." He said, "I got some guys here that have already medaled, and you're kind of a new rookie kind of guy. I'm going to have to cut the size of this team down. And you've got about 6 months to be in the top 4, or I'm going to have to let you go. It's not right for me to keep a rookie, even though you're promising, and let a proven veteran go. So I'm just giving you a heads up that you've got 6 months to be in the top 4. I mean, a top 4? Goodness gracious, I just got out of college. And so the only thing I knew to do was to get to the range early, stay late, shoot more shots than anybody else, work harder than anybody else, ask more questions than anybody else, just outwork them. That's the only thing I knew how to do. So I shot more shots than everybody else. I worked harder than everybody else. And at the end of 6 months, I limped into the top 4. And so I got to make the World Championship team the first year. I was the last guy picked. I shot worse than anybody else in the World Championships, but I made the dadgum thing. I hung on with my fingernails at the Army Marksmanship Unit. But I did get to stay.
So if you like this type of content, please think about subscribing to the channel, hit that bell notification, and then if you're not on our Patreon, Lanny's going to give more secrets on how Bill Pullum helped him become the best in the world. Thanks for watching.